Chapter 21. Beginning of the End. If there was one event that signaled the end was near, it was Sherman's march to the sea. His 60,000-man army mowed through Georgia, essentially unopposed, destroying everything along the way that could lend support to the Confederate war effort. Terror and demoralization reigned in his path and in his wake. Lee could do nothing as he was paralyzed under a siege to Grant at Petersburg, guarding Richmond. Desertion intensified as men left the front to save their families and homes from the Yankee invaders. Sherman delivered the city of Savannah as a Christmas present to Lincoln. The newfound might of the Union Army gave life to right, and Congress passed the 13th Amendment to the Constitution. Lincoln met with Confederate representatives to discuss peace. Davis was unimpressed. December 22, 1864.
About 6 weeks ago, General William T. Sherman led his 60,000-man army out of Atlanta toward the eastern seaboard of the Confederacy, leaving his supply line behind, destination unknown. Before departing, Sherman wrote, "I can make this march and make Georgia howl." He then cut his communication lines. There has been no news from him since. Until today, when the president received the following dispatch. "I beg to present you as a Christmas gift the city of Savannah with 150 heavy guns and plenty of ammunition. Also, about 25,000 bales of cotton." We have learned that Sherman's troops marched across Georgia, divided into 3 divisions stretching 60 miles wide. Along the way, they burned and looted plantations and public buildings. Slaves by the thousands left their masters and followed the Union troops to freedom. Neither the Confederacy nor Georgia offered much resistance. Sherman's march left a wasteland in its wake, destroying major sources of supply for Confederate armies. In doing so, he brought the war home to the populace, endeavoring to break their morale and weaken their will to continue the fight. Danielle Burke has more on the condition of the Confederacy.
Carter, when the Union forces swept through Georgia, essentially at will, the psychological impact on Southerners was as devastating as the impact on the countryside. Yankee soldiers destroyed all sources of food and forage and left behind a hungry and demoralized people. As was their intent, they made the old and young, rich and poor, feel the hard hand of the war.
Danielle, what is the sentiment in Richmond?
Carter, there are rumblings of dissension among some governors, but President Davis remains as determined as ever to fight to the last.
In a word, peace is impossible without independence, and it is not to be expected that the enemy will anticipate neutrals in the recognition of that independence. In the hope that the day will soon be reached when, under divine favor, these states may be allowed to enter on their former peaceful pursuits and to develop the abundant natural resources with which they are blessed. Let us then resolutely continue to devote our united and unimpaired energies to the defense of our homes, our lives, and our liberties. This is the true path to peace. Let us tread it with confidence in the assured result.
January 15th, 1865.
The surrender of Fort Fisher has many Confederate officials convinced that we cannot carry on the war any longer. The fort was the only remaining protection for Confederate blockade runners and the primary defense for the Wilmington supply line that brings food and munitions to General Lee's Army of Northern Virginia, still under siege at Petersburg. Fort Fisher's fall also left the Confederacy vulnerable to the advancing march of General Sherman's troops as he moves up the coastline to get behind General Lee's army.
January 31st, 1865.
Today, the U.S. House of Representatives passed an amendment to abolish slavery. The Senate had previously passed the same amendment on April 8th of last year. The vote of 119 to 56 narrowly reached the required two-thirds majority. The House exploded into celebration, with some members openly weeping. Black onlookers who only this year have been allowed to attend congressional sessions cheered from the galleries. Ironically, if ratified by the states, it would displace the Corwin Amendment as the 13th Amendment to the Constitution. The Corwin Amendment, pending before the states since March 2, 1861, would shield domestic institutions of the states from the constitutional amendment process and from abolition or interference by Congress. William Lloyd Garrison, who has waged a decades-long fight to end slavery, wrote to the president, quote, "God save you and bless you abundantly. As an instrument in his hands, you have done a mighty work for the freedom of the millions who have so long pined in bondage in our land, nay, for the freedom of all mankind." End quote.
I have only been an instrument. The logic and moral power of Garrison and the anti-slavery people of the country and the army have done all. But this amendment is a king's cure for all the evils. It winds the whole thing up. It's the fitting, if not indispensable, adjunct to the consummation of the great game we are playing.
February 3rd, 1865.
An attempt at peace occurred today on the steamship River Queen, near Union-controlled Fort Monroe in Hampton, Virginia. Vice President Alexander Stephens, Senator Robert Hunter, and Assistant Secretary of War John Campbell met with President Abraham Lincoln and Secretary of State William H. Seward.
As to peace, I have said before, and now repeat, that three things are indispensable: the restoration of the national authority throughout the United States, no receding by the executive of the United States on the slavery question from the position assumed thereon in the last annual message and in preceding documents, no cessation of hostilities short of an end of the war, and the disbanding of all forces hostile to the government.
The disappointed commissioners relayed Lincoln's terms to Jefferson Davis.
The proposition is insulting. The enemy refuses to enter into negotiations with the Confederate States, or any one of them separately, or to give our people any other terms or guarantees than those which a conqueror may grant or permit us to have peace on any other basis than our unconditional submission to their rule. Coupled with the acceptance of their recent legislation, including an amendment to the Constitution for the emancipation of the Negro slaves, and with the right on the part of the federal Congress to legislate on the subject of the relations between the black and white populations of each state.
March 1st, 1865.
When General Sherman's forces left Savannah, Georgia on the 30th of January, they headed straight for Columbia, South Carolina, the state capital where the secession movement began. He said at that time, "The whole army is burning with an insatiable desire to wreak vengeance upon South Carolina. I almost tremble at her fate, but feel that she deserves all that seems in store for her." Sherman's warning could not have been more prophetic. His 65,000-man army covered 10 to 12 miles a day, burning a swath 60 miles wide in grim determination, readily viewed as retribution. An abundance of alcohol greeted the Union Army as it entered Columbia on February 17th. Vengeance fueled by alcohol culminated in the looting and burning of the city, described by a Union war correspondent as the most monstrous barbarity of the barbarous march. The next day, Old Glory again flew over Fort Sumter.